I don't want this video to be a Spotify bashing. Spotify has helped millions of artists all over the world to get their music heard in parts of the world that you would never have dreamed of. And while the payment model for Spotify is not the same as CDs, well, also you can't compare a distribution model that costs millions of dollars versus something that effectively is free. Imagine if you were an artist in Europe growing up in the 90s or 2000s and you were trying to get your music on CD in a store in Nashville or New York. I mean, you'd have no chance. Spotify allows new music discovery, and more than that, it means that in my car I can listen to anything I want anytime I want. I don't have to have those 100 CDs still tucked under the chair. So this isn't about Spotify per se. This is about the dark world of playlisting. The world of playlisting is like the Wild West. There is zero policing across the board, and that is leading to hundreds of thousands of artists' careers being destroyed off the back of desperation to get their music on playlists. Now, this lack of policing on Spotify playlists would be fine if it was 2008 to 2012, maybe even 2015. This is 2023. Spotify is now 17 years old. Now, in many countries, Spotify, if it were a human at the age of 17, would be legal to get married. It would be legal to drive. It would be legal to work. It would be legal to be criminally prosecuted because of its actions. So hear me out. There are an estimated 11 million artist profiles on Spotify. That is a lot of artists releasing music into the world. And every single artist or band wants the same thing. You want your music to be heard. You live and die by the success or failure of one thing: numbers. And the fastest way to build those numbers is playlists. A good spot on a big playlist could not only get you millions of spins, but also launch your career. If you take a playlist like today's top hits, that gets up to 3 million daily listens. Think about how many streams that you could get for a couple of weeks if your music hits a good spot on that playlist. The promise of getting attention from a massive playlist draws musicians like a moth to a flame. Now, I have no problem with that. Everybody wants to jump to the front of the queue. Nobody wants to go and do the gigs with 20 people and 30 people and 40 people and do 500 of those. We all just want to jump to the front when everyone's doing the stadiums. How do I miss out all the boring bit? Get me to the stadiums. Now, the problem with this is when it comes to playing stadiums, nobody's dangling that carrot and offering you to play that show. But when it comes to playlists, there is a dark world of cheat codes. Now, this has spawned an entire business genre. Pitching your music to playlists or pitching your music to playlist creators via the likes of Playlist Push or Muso Soup or Submit Hub, this has become a massive business. And all they are doing is acting as an agency to say, you give your music, we will show it to the curators, we are doing nothing wrong. Now, technically, they aren't breaking any rules, but think about this for logic. I start a little playlist called Damo's Playlist, and I start adding my favorite songs, and all of a sudden a couple of people start following it because they like it. I add a couple more songs, and all of a sudden I've got 20, 30, 40, 50 people that are tuning in every week to listen to my playlist. And then an artist comes along, recognizes that and says, hey, I'll give you $10 if I could be on your playlist. And I say, yeah, I quite like your song actually, that sounds really, really good. I take the $10. All right, that's against terms of service, but I take the $10 and I put that song onto my playlist. Then a week later, someone else comes along and says, hey, I want to be on your playlist and I'll give you $20 because now it's grown a little bit more. And I think, wow, what am I going to do? I'm going to think, well, if I get more numbers, I can get more money. So therefore, my 30, 40, 50 people that are actual followers, if I could 10x that, my $10 might become $100. You can see the incentive. All of a sudden, I'm like, well, I could literally just invest $100, $200 in making my playlist look real, and then I can make thousands of dollars off the back of it because no one knows the difference. Now, there are plenty of places online that you can do your due diligence when it comes to researching a playlist, whether that's Chartmetric, for example. There are plenty of others, but most people don't do that. Most people just see numbers and say, hey, I want to be on that playlist. I haven't done any due diligence, but I really need those numbers. Now, while Spotify's T's and C's strictly prohibit anybody from buying onto a playlist, do you know anyone who's been caught? Do you know anyone who's been caught and prosecuted? And One very quick Google search and I can find an entire world of illegal botted services. And what makes it worse is they're even advertising on Google. This is completely illegal, and yet Google is allowing them to advertise their illegal service on their platform. Now, the consequences of getting caught if you've got a botted playlist, well, you're probably going to lose your playlist. But the consequences that come when an artist uses these services is massive, and it goes on for a much longer period of time because it breaks your algorithm, it breaks your Spotify, it breaks your radio, it breaks your fans also like. It means Spotify doesn't know where to put your music. Why? Because it's using data to calculate where it should put your music, which playlists it should put your music in. And it can't, because now it's trying to figure out why the same people are listening to all different types of music from all over the world. Whilst almost every artist knows this is wrong, there's a bigger problem, which is the lure to get numbers, the anxiety, the desperation to fit in, to not feel like a failure, which tends to kick in. And there isn't a day that goes by where I don't get a message from an artist asking me, how do I fix this? Because I did do the wrong thing and I did go and buy those numbers, but now everything seems broken and what do I do? Now, Spotify doesn't own any of these companies. These are independent companies. And why should Spotify help you for trying to cheat the system? After all, you're the one who paid money to try and break the system within Spotify. So why should Spotify say, don't worry, I'll fix it? No, but I do believe there is a duty of care for Spotify to look after artists in general. After all, for every one Ed Sheeran, for every one Drake, for every one Taylor Swift, there are hundreds of thousands of artists who are desperately working hard trying to get their music heard. So what could Spotify do about this problem? Well, Spotify, if you are listening, which I do know you tune in from time to time, I have 2 suggestions that I think could massively help hundreds of thousands, if not millions of artists. So here's what I think Spotify should do. Number 1, I think Spotify should take away the streaming numbers attached to every song, which is visible to the world. The public humiliation of your song not doing as well as you would like it to do. Now, I can already hear the gasps of horror from so many artists being like, you can't take away my numbers off the front end of Spotify. But hear me out. This is music. This is not a popularity contest. So whilst I was writing this video, I was listening to music. In fact, I was listening to one of my favorite bands, which is Thrice. Yes, I know I'm quite a boomer, but I was listening to a song called Image of the Invisible by a band called Thrice. When I checked it out, they had 2.8 million streams on that song. Now, if I compare that to, say, Blinding Lights by The Weeknd, that has 3.8 billion streams on that song alone. Does that make me want to stop listening to Thrice and go and listening to Blinding Lights by The Weeknd? No, of course I don't. I don't give a shit about that. I want to listen to the music I want to listen to. Now, taking numbers away from the front end of Spotify will help artists focus on the right metrics. It will also reduce that level of anxiety and desperation. And as well as that, it will reduce the temptation to try and buy validation. After all, artists know what they're doing is wrong, but they need to do it because they need to save face and they need to show everyone else that their numbers are really high. But if they don't have to show everyone else because it's just for their own viewing, then great. They can show them on social media if they want to, but if they don't want to, who cares? Number 2, I believe that Spotify need to make a department of fraud within Spotify. Now, Spotify already have plenty of ways of detecting fraud, but I don't think it's the same thing. Detecting fraud with the likes of someone who's trying to bot farm their way to 1 billion streams is very, very different to all of these playlist companies that are ripping off artists for hundreds, if not thousands of dollars in order to try and play the game, play the machine, cheat code an artist's way whilst breaking their Spotify. Now, every single one of these companies is against Spotify's terms of service, so it should be very easy to take it down. After all, I can't even make a video with 2 seconds worth of music from a track without a label claiming my video. So I'm pretty sure that Spotify has the ways and means to go and take these companies out. Now, in doing so, we will make a better world for artists. We will make a brighter world in which artists can't cheat even if they want to. Whilst I love Spotify, I believe Spotify has a duty of care to the music industry and, more importantly, a duty of care to the artists who are putting their art and music out to the world via their platform. But at the end of the day, Spotify is 17 years old and nothing has been done yet. So this video is effectively me reaching out to artists and saying, please stop buying bots. Please stop buying onto playlists. I understand that you want to get big numbers and Spotify will not stop you from doing that. But the consequences are much bigger than you think, because once you've done it, the validation goes away. All of a sudden, you need the next batch of numbers, but in doing so, you have broken your algorithm. All of a sudden, everything in the world of Spotify is now not helping you to achieve the dreams that you want, and all you are left with is some bigger numbers on a screen, and an ego that was big and is now bruised. We are living in a very weird time where you now need a specific strategy to build your numbers on Spotify, just like you need a specific strategy to build your numbers on socials, and a specific strategy for how you are going to build your tours and your gigs, and they don't always interlace and have synergy. But you can have these different strategies that start to combine between them. But just buying plots, buying playlists, buying numbers will mean that all of the affected strategies will all be broken. Once again, I don't want this to be a Spotify bashing session in the comments. Spotify does an incredible job for discoverability, and whilst there might be some issues that go with that, they are an incredible tool for artists. But we do need to get rid of fake playlists and botted playlists, and we need to get out of the habit of trying to think that numbers will solve all problems. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon.